All right, I'm getting the signal we can begin. My name is David Demore. I'm the Executive Director of the Lincy Institute in Brookings Mountain West. I want to thank you all for coming out this evening, braving traffic and road construction, all the joys of getting to UNLV in the late evening. So tonight, Lincy Institute is happy to host a book talk for Len, Selfless. Just as I'm sure everybody here is familiar, Len is back in Vegas. We brought him on to Lincy a couple months ago, and it was an easy call, right? Because Len never left Las Vegas, right? He was always here. Christy's business is here, going back and forth, staying connected to the community. So it was an easy call. And then obviously he's been working for us, bringing his first project to fruition already, looking at the startup economy in Southern Nevada. And he's got some good news for that, but I will save that for another time. And working and mentoring one of our research associates, one of our students out of the econ department today. So Len's going to talk about leadership, but I just wanted a couple things that I've noticed in a couple of months that I've been working with Len is two really great qualities. The first is he's a very positive person. We spend a lot of time with doom and gloom. That's kind of what goes with studying public policy in Nevada. There's very few bright days, but Len's always like, no, you got to look at it this way. So he's bringing that positivity in the shop, which we very much appreciate that. And of course, his kindness. Just such a kind human being, taking to our student researchers already, building up that rapport, making connections for other people on the team. It's just been wonderful to have him here, and we're so glad to host you tonight. So I'll turn it over to the man of the hour, Len Jessup.
Thanks, Dave. How are we doing? Did it pick up? Oh, wait a minute. Okay, there we go. I was muted. Dave, thanks for setting this up for me, and a big thank you to the entire team at Lincy, all of whom I saw here, Caitlin and Ashley and Michael and Bill. And I've always said, and I mentioned in the book, that I like to surround myself by people smarter than me, and that is definitely the case in the Lincy Institute. I'm surrounded by really bright people and very passionate about what they're doing, and it's a real privilege to be a part of it. And back when I was president, I always worked hand in glove with all you guys, and Rob included, and the team at Brookings as well. And we got a lot done in a short amount of time when I was here as president. It was a really fruitful, very productive relationship. So anyway, thank you for so generously welcoming me back. So this is, I feel like this is just, we could be at our house because these are all my friends, and we should be doing this over a glass of wine. And I'm just going to tell a handful of stories that kind of run through the chapters of the book, or the acts, as I refer to them in the book. I tried to do a couple of things with the book. One was, I actually wanted people to be able to read it quickly and get through it. And so I kind of tried to write it in the style of an author you've probably heard of, Mitch Albom. So Tuesdays with Morrie, it would be one example. And I always loved his books because I felt like that was like a one-segment book. I could be on a flight, maybe 2 segments, and I could get through the book. And you wanted to get through the book. It was good narrative storytelling, and you wanted to read it right from start to finish and get right through it. And so that kind of led to the style and the size. And then somewhere along the line, I got the idea of I was thinking about the arc of a story, kind of that has a beginning and a middle and an end. And then that translated into the acts, like you would see in a Shakespearean play. And so then that gave the book some structure. I actually wrote the book, let's see, two years ago from this past summer. So that would have been the summer of 2022, I think. Down in California, in the COVID lockdown phase, LA County was very conservative. So the higher ed institutions in Southern California were on lockdown for a full 2 years. And so that would have been the summer as we were just coming out of things. And I was feeling a little antsy. And so that summer, on kind of nights and weekends, I sat down and wrote the first draft of the book. And then I did nothing. I sat on it for a full year because, quite frankly, I didn't have the courage to do anything with it. I didn't think anybody would want to read it. Christy will remember that I sent it to my family. A lot of the book, for those that have read it, you probably recognize a lot of it is written for my 2 kids, Jamie and David. They haven't read it. Have not cracked the book, haven't looked in it. I didn't really write it for my 4 siblings. They all read it and criticized it heavily. I had a lot back from my siblings. But then took a year, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I think it was just fortuitous. Forbes reached out. That would have been then summer of 23. And next thing I know, I'm under contract with Forbes in like that August. And then it didn't take that long. And then kind of goes through until April, this past April of 2024. And then it was finally launched. And I'm thrilled when people actually read it and then give me feedback about the book or a particular story or an anecdote that meant something to them. That means the world to me, just the fact that it made a difference for somebody. So anyway, here it is. So I'll do this in a series of questions. This is about 8 or 9 slides of just that are pictures that prompt a story from me. And I want to save some time because I'm interested in hearing some feedback, questions, anything you might have. Randy has already told me what his first question is, so I'll skip Randy and I'm going to go to other people and try to avoid his question. The first bit of feedback I got from Forbes that was very helpful was they read the first draft that I'd written that summer. And I'm on Zoom with a bunch of these very important people from Forbes Publishing. And one of them, very politely, the first bit of advice they gave me was, you're not famous enough for a memoir, so we're going to have to repurpose this book. And then that shifted it into what it is now. It's really more of a leadership book that's kind of filled with anecdotes that I use to make points. And that's what I'm going to do today. So let's get started. So selfless leadership, 3 words. I'll explain why I've done that to start. But the thesis of the talk is that selfless leadership is a better way to lead people through change. It's actually a better way to get things done. Think go slow to go fast. That probably sums up the thesis of the book as well. And at the end of the day, when you get to the end of your path, I would submit to you that it's a lot better way to do things. You're going to feel a lot better about it too, as a way to manage and to lead people. That's me holding up a wall at Claremont Graduate University, in my important duties as president. So in the book, I start with an origin story. And so this is a picture of my mom and dad. Virginia and Ilario, he was the baby of the family. So growing up, we knew him as Nini. His friends all called him Nini, the baby. So the question I ask is, from where do you come and how does that shape you now as a leader? I start with this because those two definitely had an impact on me, both from Italian families. My dad's side from Trieste, Italy, kind of think Sicily, and then if you kind of follow Italy up around, kind of up on the European side, little town there next to Croatia. That was the Jessup family, and that's the name that got changed to Jessup when they came through Ellis Island. The Northern Italians, my mom's family, on the other hand, was from Sicily. So that's bad news for the Northern Italians. The two families did not get along. And that went through, the whole childhood, mine growing up in San Francisco, like literally almost going to 2 sets of events because the Northern Italians did not want to hang around with the Sicilians. But there are 2 parts to me now, and I think they come from independently from my parents. I've got, like Dave mentioned, the first study is a study of the startup ecosystem. And I've been helping out with the Office of Economic Development on campus as they're thinking about a venture capital fund, first time for the university. That all comes from my dad. That's a long line of small businesses in the family on his side. They were classic Italian entrepreneurs with every little mom and pop business that you can think of. And that was the way that they survived, sometimes illegally, maybe selling a little bit of alcohol at times when they weren't supposed to. But they scratched out a way to make a living. And my mom was the loving mom, so generous in her time and in her love with me and my brothers and sisters. And I think the notion of selfless leadership comes from my mom. So my origin story definitely starts with the parents, and the book comes from the influence that my mom had on me for sure. They would be very proud to see me doing this right now, in fact. Then this question, when were you at your best? So this comes from a leadership retreat that I did. Some of you may remember, I always like to start off the school year with a leadership retreat, and we invite a big extended group, sometimes up to 30 or maybe more, to spend a day together, kind of thinking together about what the year to come is going to look like and how we might shape it together. And I generally try to get somebody to help me with the leadership retreats. Remember, surround yourself by people smarter than you. So in Claremont, in my final year at Claremont, was going to kick off the year with our leadership retreat with about 30 people. And I had been working with one of the doctoral students there, Jennifer Villalobos, and who's now graduated, got her PhD there in organizational behavior, same thing I majored in back in college at Arizona. And then she got hired to teach there now. They really like her work, and I taught with her a couple times, and we published a paper together. She's terrific and has a business on the side doing consulting a lot like Christy does and working with organizations and leadership and organizational change. And Jennifer's terrific. So I had her help me set up the context for our leadership retreat to kick off the school year. And I asked her, she said, we need to do some, kind of an icebreaker exercise. And I said, well, why don't you do that? You figure out what the exercise is, and then you run the exercise. And this was the question at the basis of her exercise. Think of a moment in your life, and I'll ask you to do this now, kind of quietly, as you're sitting there. Think of a moment when you were at your best, when you think that you were living your best self. And it might be personal, it might be professional, okay, it doesn't really matter. But think of something when you think you were really self-actualizing, living your best self, or a moment when you were at your best. So she sets up the exercise in the room with everybody, and then they're starting to talk and make notes and think about what they're going to talk about. And we're up in the front of the room, kind of whispering to each other, and she says, you should come up with something, you and I, and then we'll share our stories as we kick this thing off. So I go, okay, good, all right, fine. So we take a minute, and I got a lot of cool stuff I could talk about. And I come up with an idea that wasn't necessarily positive. In fact, it was what I would consider a real low point, maybe the lowest point that I was at in my adult life. And I said to her, I have one that I think is the one, but it's not very positive. And she said, well, let's share them quietly. And we whispered to each other, and she tells me hers, and it's great, and it's about a situation with her family that was overcome. And so I start telling mine quietly with Jen at the front of the room, and everybody's busy, and so they're not looking at us, but I start telling her, and I'm crying as I'm telling her my story. And I get through it, and I said, I don't think I can do this in front of the group, the leadership team. I really don't think I can get through it. And she encouraged me to do it, and I did. And I think it helped because it opened up the room, and then we got a lot of people opening up as they went around and were talking about their lives. Probably was the best part of the retreat. All the other stuff we did after that, I think, paled in comparison to that moment of everybody sharing, deep kind of sharing around the room. Here's my story, and I've got this picture, and that is my mom kind of going, hey, wait, kind of taking pictures. Sit down. This is at what my kids and I affectionately used to call the Mountain House in Moscow, Idaho. I was there for 12 years, working at Washington State University. This is a night when she was there, and my brother Steve and his daughter were there. My sister Patricia is on the side. My son David, in front. And Casey is a friend. My daughter's shy, and so her head's going off to the side of the picture. We did a lot of dinners like this, and it was a blast, a lot of fun. There was a night, however, at the Mountain House, not as joyous as this night, and that was the moment that came to me. Let me tell you about the moment, and then why I think of it as a moment when I was at my best. It's a little counterintuitive, but there was a night when it was just my two kids and me. Sometime before this, they were a little bit younger than that picture. I had just come off, at the time, a very difficult divorce, painful, difficult divorce. And I'm there in the house with the kids. I'm on a parenting plan where I've got them with me half the time. And I just got them off to bed. The rooms are like little Jack and Jill rooms off on the sides, and I got them safely in bed. And I'm out feeling sorry for myself. And we had a great view at night down into you could see down into Moscow, Idaho, the Kibbe Dome and the campus of University of Idaho, the lights twinkling in the distance at night. And I poured myself a good Washington Cabernet, and I kind of sat in the dark just looking down out at the view in the valley into Idaho. And I was literally crying into my Cabernet and sipping my salty Cabernet that night. And so here's what I was feeling, a whole range of emotions. I kind of, on the one hand, coming off the divorce and feeling all the emotions that go around that, none of which are good. A lot of guilt and frustration. I was very sad and a number of other things. Not happy with myself. And then going forward, really feeling, quite frankly, abject fear. I had just shifted from being dean of the business school to becoming vice president for advancement, and wondering how the heck am I going to do this now? But being a busy executive, having to travel a lot, and having my kids with me half the time, and I wanted that. But quite frankly, I didn't know how I was going to do that, and I was really afraid that I wasn't going to be able to do either well, raising my kids or the job. And then in the moment, probably the most acute feeling of all of it was I felt the most lonely that I've ever felt ever in my life, like at the point almost of despair, that kind of loneliness. Now, I had my kids with me, and I had plenty of friends at work, but you know where I'm going. I mean, at that point in my life, super loneliness and really, like I said, to a sense of despair. So why is this, Len, your best moment when you're at your best? Because it was not pretty. Glad there were no one around to take pictures that night. I think of it as a moment when I was at my best because I was forced to shift from being a fairly selfish person to being a more selfless person. And it's not that I was a bad person, but that leading up to that moment, everything in my life and in my family and with my former wife was all aimed around me, around busy Len, working and doing stuff. Everybody was there, to kind of help me do what I needed to do. And in that sense, I was pretty selfish. And I think I didn't at the time appreciate, the help that I was getting. And then I had to shift overnight. I had no choice. Now I had to figure out how to actually raise kids half the week and the half the time that they were with me to do everything while trying to also travel and do everything I needed to do for the university. So I had no choice but to make that shift. Selfish to selfless. And it was an epiphany for me in many ways. And it shaped the way I thought about my role and what I needed to do as I moved into leadership opportunities after that. Really affected me personally, translated into an effect professionally as well. So next, I'll do a little example now we'll think about being selfless in the context of an organization as a leader. You'll recognize this picture not far from here down the mall. What does it mean to selfless? So I'm drawing a distinction. If you think of self as a verb, then think of like wag more, bark less. So I'm saying you need to self less. Active state. You're behaving. You're actually acting in the best interests of other people. There's a lot written about servant leadership going all the way back to the 70s and Robert Greenleaf, and there's been great stuff written ever since then. And a lot of it, though, is written about selfless as a state of mind, thinking about other people more than you normally would, or thinking about others before you would think about yourself. And the point I'm trying to make is that that's a good way to frame up things as you're leading, but then at some point you actually have to do things. You make decisions and you do things, you should be doing them in support of other people, the stakeholders that you're responsible for. So think of self as a verb. I use this picture just to prompt another story. The Rose Garden. When I got here, first as president some 10 years ago, I did as good leaders often do. You do your 100-day listening tour. And I went around to stakeholder groups both on campus and off, and spent literally 100 days in meetings and dinners and lunches and breakfasts, meeting with people and hearing from them their aspirations for UNLV. One of my on-campus meetings, and I would have to do this in groups for some of the on-campus employee groups, because even at the time, I think there were a few thousand employees, and it was too many to do one-on-ones, although we did a lot of one-on-ones. But that day, I was meeting with the groundskeeping crew, and one of the supervisors was there kind of helping to run with me and Fred Treadup to kind of run that meeting. Although the groundskeeping supervisor, Conrad Wilson, who's now retired, didn't actually say too much that day other than just making sure that the meeting ran well. And then when he was done, Conrad came up as people were leaving the room and said, I didn't really want to say too much today, but I'd like to come by your office if it's okay, and just have a few minutes, and I'd like to talk to you privately. And I thought, okay, that's kind of unusual, but that's fine. So Fred set up a meeting, and some days later, Conrad came up to the office in FDH. And think about the courage it takes for Conrad to do this at that point. And he comes in and gets right to the point in a very quick and pointed meeting and says, Mr. President, you know that there's a generous tuition benefit here at UNLV for the faculty. And I said, yeah, I actually am aware of that because I had a lot of friends here in the business school and I knew that they were taking advantage of that tuition benefit. It basically means their kids or their significant others get to go to UNLV at reduced prices. And it's a really, really good deal. And I said, yeah, so I am aware of the offer and I know faculty really take advantage of it. And he said, Mr. President, you know that it's also available to the administrators like yourself and also to the professional staff. And I said, well, I didn't know that, but that's good to know. That's good for them to be able to take advantage of that as well. And then here comes the point. Mr. President, are you aware that that benefit is not extended to the classified staff like myself, groundskeepers, bookkeepers, the people who really do the actual work at the university and make the university go? And quite frankly, probably need the tuition benefit more than anybody. Their kids can't afford to go to UNLV, even though it was and still is relatively moderately priced compared to other opportunities around the country in higher ed. And anyway, so I said to him, I didn't know that. That's a problem. And he said, we need to do something about this. And I said, you're right, Conrad, we need to do something about this. So some in the room here helped to get that done. It was a lot harder than it should have been. It took a lot longer than it should have taken. I won't get into the reasons why, but you'd think that would just be something that would get approved pretty quickly, but it was not. It was very difficult to get that through, but we got it through. I give the credit to Conrad, not only for being the impetus for that tuition benefit that's still enjoyed by everyone, all the employees at the university, but he also worked tirelessly to push that thing through to the point that he showed up, some of you may remember him showing up at several Regents meetings in public comment. I mean, like taking a stand and really pushing that thing through. And I think it made a difference, him doing that, because some of the impasse was at the level of the board. So anyway, I give Conrad the credit. It made a difference for me. Him doing that made a big difference. Again, an epiphany, because I realized, during the time I was here, it's such an amazing time at the university, and so many cool things happened. Getting the stadium deal done and getting the medical school launched and a number of other things, and a lot of hard work from a lot of people. But I think back, God, I'm gonna get emotional. I think back and it's the little things like that work with Conrad and getting that done, because it really meant something. That actually meant something in real people's lives in a real way. Think of the transformative effect that had on families generations to come. That now you've got somebody who couldn't afford to send their son or daughter here, that now has available a whole array of incredible programs at the university that they wouldn't have had access to. And it sort of stuck in my mind that was what it was all about. That was why I was here, was to do things like that. Not only thinking selflessly, but acting and doing things in the best interests of people who really need it, especially the people who really needed it. So now let's think about, so now you kind of got a frame for leading selflessly, self as a verb. And let me use an example that I think helps, I hope will help you to think about how to use this as a way to deal with resistance to change. As leaders, if you're really trying to move the needle, you want to move your team or your organization from here to here, from point A to point B, it's organizational change. And you're going to deal with resistance to that change for a variety of reasons. You hope that it's out in the open and you know who it is, and what you're dealing with, but it's probably not going to be. It'll be all passive aggressive, and it'll be stuff that you'll have to ferret out with your spidey senses and then try to deal with. It's inevitable. It's always there. It doesn't matter the setting. I'll use an example at the University of Arizona. That's the business school that I graduated from, McClellan Hall, and it's the Eller College of Management. And I was down there in the late 80s for a PhD, and then got asked to go back like 22 years later to be the dean of the business school that I was a graduate student at. And I barely got into that graduate school. I barely got in, and was so surprised to go back as dean. And two of the faculty members who were on my dissertation committee were still there, sort of nearing retirement. That was weird, kind of going back and then being the dean. And whatever, I'll save those stories for later. Did my 100-day listening tour with all the stakeholders, And enrollment was going down at the time in the MBA platform especially, and it was a time when MBA programs around the country were really getting hit hard. They're actually up this year on average by about 10 or 12% around the country for a variety of reasons, but that was a time when MBA programs were tanking. U of A had dabbled with online a little bit for a specialty master's degree, and they really needed to do online with their MBA program at that point. So that was clear from the initial analysis and the 100-day tour and listening to everybody, that we knew we needed to do that, but it wasn't going to be easy. Gene remembers this, and it was going to be a heavy lift. And so as we started to kind of think about implementation and talk to people about how to do this, it became pretty clear that we had a senior group of faculty that were resistant to the change. And some were kind of doing some passive aggressive stuff behind the scenes. Others who were maybe not so worried about any repercussions were much more open about it and forward about it. Sort of some fighting in the open, some fighting behind you, getting hit from behind. You don't know where it's coming from. It's passive aggressive. But it was a group that was pretty powerful and significant enough that it would have made it really difficult to implement an online MBA. It would have been really hard. We would have eventually got it done at the end of the day, but it would have been really difficult with all that pressure against it. So you think, as a good leader, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk with these people and hold town halls and forums and get feedback. But that didn't produce much. Those conversations were up at the 30,000-foot level about things like, well, we're creating leaders, in this MBA program, and you can't do that online. If you think about the goals and the pedagogy, it doesn't match the modality, and we're getting all these fancy words about the delivery of the program and why it just couldn't possibly work. But we knew that wasn't right, because even back then, there were programs around the country who were doing online programs who were ranked way higher than us. They were way better than us doing online MBAs, creating leaders and placing them in a really good job. So we knew that wasn't the real reason. We were just getting a lot of that, kind of academic speak, but we knew that it wasn't the real reason. So I give credit to Jeff Schatzberg, who was an accounting professor there and was vice dean and dean, and I think he's back on faculty now, maybe running the accounting program. Is he?
Still vice dean.
He's vice dean.
Next June.
That doesn't mean dean of vice, but that's why at Arizona, they just called the number 2 person the vice dean, the associate dean. But contrary to most of the people I know who are accounting faculty, Jeff actually had high emotional intelligence and was really good with people. And so that's partly joke, partly true. But Jeff had the great idea, and he knew a lot of these faculty members, and they happened to be men, and he said to me, we need to get these guys off campus. Let's get them out, break bread, and we may have done that. It may have been at a bar, and it may have involved beer. We got them off campus to try to get into a setting where we could kind of try to get to the real reasons. Again, think of the theme here, go slow to go fast. So we took the time and did that extra step and went and met with them. And we started talking, and what we found out from this group was that, the real reason was that they were getting toward the end of their careers. They were used to teaching, and by and large, they were really good teachers. You kind of can't be a bad teacher at the Eller College. Highly ranked undergraduate program, and a pretty good MBA, sort of suite of MBA offerings. You have to be a good teacher there, and they were good. And it was just, they were getting the end of their time there. The work that they would have had to go through to go from teaching, on ground to teaching online, having to learn a learning management system, and port everything over into that, and work with an instructional designer when they're used to building their syllabus by themselves, and everything you go through when you shift to online, it just wasn't worth it. And they were explaining this to us. We got into a setting where everybody's guard was down, and we're really hearing the real stuff from these guys, and it just was a heavy lift for them. And Jeff and I found that you kind of think of the stages you go through. One, it was a good step that we thought, hey, we need to go listen to these people. There's epiphany number 1. 2 is to then actually go set it up so that we can actually have an honest conversation. 3 is that we actually listened, but then the real shift was that Jeff and I found that we were agreeing with them. And we said, well, yeah, we agree. You guys shouldn't have to do this. It doesn't make sense. Well, you guys need to just keep doing what you're doing. And so I think by sharing that empathy, really empathizing and agreeing with them, and not just agreeing in my head, but we were talking with them and saying, no, we agree. You're right. You shouldn't have to do this. You're absolutely right. Now, what do we do? How do we get by this impasse? So we sort of struck a detente where we got that faculty to agree they would continue teaching on ground like they did well until they were done and they would retire, in a few years. And we just needed their agreement that they would let this other group of champions who really wanted to do the online MBA, to let them build it. They would design it, they would implement it, and they would teach in it. And that these guys wouldn't have to do any of that. But I just needed their agreement that they wouldn't sabotage the efforts of these guys or do any weird passive-aggressive stuff. And that wasn't that hard, because we just said, look, okay, we agree these enrollments are tanking and they're vital to our revenue. We need them for revenue, and most of the biggest expense in the business school and really any academic program is people. You're paying people salaries. So we agreed that enrollment's down, that revenue's down, yes, agreed. We agree it's going to affect your salaries and everybody else's, agreed. We agree we need to do something, agreed. So we'll agree, you'll do this and let them do that, and they're going to save all of us and save our bacon, literally, in the long run if we just let them do it, agreed. And so we get to the detente, and we get there. And they built an online MBA that has hundreds now. And the on-ground MBA, they've kept it, but it's small. And now the online MBA is a much, much bigger platform for them for enrollment. So it worked. So again, we could have ramrodded that through and probably got it done, but God, it would have been painful. It probably would have taken longer. A lot of us would have had a lot of scars on our backs from doing that. Go slow to go fast. We took the time, we went a little slower, took our egos out of it, Jeff and I, and learned what was bothering those people and how to get through the impasse. It worked, it helped. Selfless leadership helped in dealing with resistance in that instance. Now it's got a couple, I'm gonna go up now at a 30,000 foot level. Think about this in a different, kind of a different context. How do you spend your time? The point, I'll begin with a little quick anecdote. I read a great interview with Neil Armstrong, astronaut, and there was like a pithy question in this interview that he kind of gave this sort of, off the cuff, kind of meaning to be cute answer to, but there was some deep meaning underlying it. And the question was something about, at your age, how do you stay in shape, and do you jog, or this and that? How are you kind of keeping yourself in shape? And he said something, kind of a serious part, and then he had his little pithy joke. But it was something along the lines of, each of us, the way I look at it is, this is Neil Armstrong saying, each of us is here on this earth with a finite number of beats in our heart. And then his joke was, and I'll be damned if I'm going to waste my time jogging up and down the street, running, or whatever the question was. But you think about the first part of that, and there's a bit of seriousness and reality to that when you think about it. Each of us is on this earth with a finite number of beats in our heart. We are. You could count them, and the average age and the average beats of heart and the actual, your heart rate. You could calculate that we've all got a finite number that we're steadily working through each day. And that got me thinking about the people that I worked with, again, trying to empathize and think about their time on this earth and how they're spending their time. And so I extrapolated from that, and I thought, okay, think about then that over a life. Sort of think of a typical life. Most of us, normal people, start working at a very young age, and then you work hard all your life. And sadly, a lot of people work all the way, especially guys, work to the end of their life, and then sadly work too long, and they make it for a little bit longer and sort of fall off the health shelf and pass, sadly, with a big chunk, a big swath of our life devoted to work. So think about now, kind of come back to think of a day, pick one day in that life of that hard work. And again, I'm thinking about this as the people that I was responsible for. It changed the way I thought about work and how to treat people. In a 24-hour cycle, anywhere in that whole swath of a life working, pick a 24-hour cycle. Typical 24-hour cycle, you take out the hours that you're sleeping, and the remaining waking hours for normal people, mere mortals who work for a living, you are spending an inordinate, proportion of that time of the waking hours working. And before COVID, I would have said at work. After COVID, maybe I would say working. You might be working at home or doing, a little bit of a hybrid kind of a thing. But most people spend an inordinate proportion of their waking hours working. So I'm thinking about the sand through the hourglass, and it made me think about the people that I'm responsible for. And here's what I got to when I thought about that. Wow, isn't it then my job to make sure that that's time well spent? Since they're spending so much of it, an inordinate amount of their lives working with me or whatever setting they're working in, I have the opportunity as the leader to make sure that that time is well spent from their point of view, that they're actually deriving meaning and fulfillment from the work. That, not only at a minimum, they might actually have fun at work occasionally, maybe occasionally laugh out loud at work. What a novel concept. But that, at a grander scale, that the real duty of the leader is to make sure that everyone under your charge is deriving personal meaning and fulfillment from the work that they're doing. And I don't mean meaningful to the company, I mean meaningful to them. And that you're finding a way to make sure that they're engaged and they're doing a task or whatever the role is that they find meaning in. It was a real epiphany for me as well. And in fact, I got to the point where I thought that's the most important thing I'm doing is that, and making sure people are engaged in deriving meaning from what they're doing. Selfless leadership. What impact do you strive to have, and what do you wish your legacy to be? This is a picture, Randy will know, of Lake Coeur d'Alene, and that was some time ago with me and my kids jumping off the back of a boat. Son David would pick a spot. Where am I going to jump? Do you want me to do a cannonball? What do you want me to do? My daughter's back there, Jamie, probably saying, just jump. Jesus, just jump, Dave. Jump in. Many happy memories. We were just up there this summer with them, kind of reliving some of the old memories. Christy and I rented a boat again on Lake Coeur d'Alene. So somewhere along the line, as I got older, I'm 63 now, but I started to think about legacy. You think about the things that you do, and they have an effect on people. People form perceptions of you and of the outcomes of things that happen. That shapes a reputation, and you have a reputation that endures, and sometimes good things happen and sometimes bad things happen, and that all influences the reputation and the way people think about you. And I've had ups and downs and that have shaped that in myriad sets of ways over the years. And then I got to thinking that, okay, I'm now nearing the end of this time, at least in higher ed administration. And I wondered, after I'm done, and then, this is sort of, if you define legacy, it's after you're gone. Legacy then is out here, and that's how do people remember you? What's the lasting impact from the time that you had here? And, is there an impact, and what's the shape of that impact? And I started to think about my legacy. And then I had an event at UNLV, or a chance golf cart ride that changed the way I stopped thinking about my legacy. Because I figured out there was something more important to think about. So I get a call. He doesn't think he'd put this call onto me, but I'm going to attribute this call to Randy, who was a trustee at the time, and still is, and very successfully helping to manage the UNLV Foundation. And he was just the alumni of the year just a few nights ago. Congratulations, Randy. And as Randy would often do, always looking out for the university, gave me a call, as he frequently would do. There was something he thought that I needed to be tending to. And he called and said, we've got another trustee who's not doing well. And I didn't realize it, but Irwin was, in fact, in a wheelchair. And I hadn't seen him in quite some time, so I didn't realize the extent of his physical health. And Randy said, he's not physically not feeling well, and he's also a little down. You need to get him to campus and get him on a golf cart and get a little ride around campus and help him to realize the impact that he had on the campus. And he had quite an impact. He was a part of the original group. We always joke, the Lincy group, we always joke about whether UNLV is included in the land grant or not a land grant. And the land grant technically is actually for the system, all the campuses. But UNLV, if you think about how it actually went down and this campus got started, it was a land grant, literally. Because Irwin and other families, Thomas and Mac and others, put together all the land that was then granted to what would become UNLV, and Irwin was there as a part of that. And then as a developer, had a hand in developing a number of the building projects on campus and around campus. So he had a big hand, left big footprints and fingerprints, whatever you want to say, on the campus as it evolved over the decades. And so it was appropriate to do something for him, to help him see that legacy, for him to be able to see and be reminded of his legacy before he left. So we did. His wife got him he had a van and he had a driver, and they got him to campus. Many of you remember Scott Roberts. We were the odd couple. Scott was the 6'8", former basketball player, fundraiser extraordinaire, and I was a little short Italian baseball player. We were kind of an odd pair, but we worked really well together and got along great. And so we get in the golf cart, and it's one of the extended cab golf carts with Scott driving, and Erwin and his wife and me, and we're doing our little tour around campus. And Scott and I are reminding them of this, this land and this building, and you had a role in that building. And as we're going around the campus and telling these little stories, he couldn't talk. He was, from Saturday Night Live? Verklempt. He just couldn't get words out. It was really emotional for him around this ride. You could tell that Randy's instinct was right, and it made a huge difference for Erwin to do this. So we got all the way around. We get back over to the foundation building, and then we get him safely ensconced back in the van. And I don't know why it came to me, but in that moment, I thought of, and I said to him as I thanked him and his wife, the quote that's attributed to Sir Isaac Newton. Historians argue whether he was the first one to say it. I think it was one of those cases where he was the first famous person to say it, so it's attributed to him, but I'm sure people said it long before that. But it was that, if I've seen Father, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. And so I give him that quote, and I start talking about why it was so important for him to be there that day, and why we were so grateful for him for everything that he and his family had done for the campus and its development over the decades. And I couldn't talk. And it literally was a situation where we were all crying. Me and Erwin and his wife and Scott, the driver, might have been crying as well. It was very emotional. But it was the right thing to do. It was right for you to call me and for us to do that for him. And he did pass away a short time after that. I'm so glad we got to do that. Fundraising was such a great part of the job. And it wasn't about the raising the money, but it was about the relationships and working with people, in that moment in their lives when they're really having deep impact on something they care about. It's a privilege to be able to be involved in that with people who are able to do that, and to be in that moment with them, and in that moment with him that day. And it got me thinking, this is not about my legacy, but what an opportunity to be able to help influence the legacy of others, and to remind them that there is a legacy and they've got a lot to be proud of. It was an incredible afternoon. Okay, I think I'm getting toward the last one. I need to be, yes, but I want to save time for questions. A little bit of Italian, an Italian lesson. Ancora imparo, yet I am learning. It's a close translation of that. So why am I including that here at the end? Again, historians attribute this to Michelangelo, and he's 87 years old, and as he's working on the Sistine Chapel, historians debate, was he laying on the scaffolding? Was he standing? We don't know for sure. People didn't have the iPhones out, snapping pictures of him while he was doing this. But at 87 years old, he is thought to have said, uttered these words, meaning, here I am at 87. I've done a lot. I've accomplished a lot, and I'm still working, and I'm working on this project, and yet I am learning. I'm still learning, at this stage of the career. Really important words, because the point that I want to try to drive home here and leave you with is that I think for all of us who have the opportunity to be in leadership roles, it's important not to think of ourselves as leaders per se. Maybe better to think of yourself as a student of learning, right? Not as a leader, but as a student of learning. Continually learning, continually evolving, continuing to grow. Every role you're in, every person you're working with, every place you're at, every situation, something new, it's something different. You continue to learn. You continue to hone the craft. And in a Zen-like way, you never really arrive. It's about working to do a better job every day. So I'll leave you with that, our little bit of Italian. So the thesis again, selfless leadership, scratch that, selfless verb. Leadership is a better way to lead people through change. And it feels better too, because you can get, Christy, hears me talk about this all the time. I've got written in a little moleskin notebook at home. I've had it for decades. That for me, when I get to the end of my path, in that moment, I want to know that as I look back across the path, that I did everything I could to do as much good for as many people as I could, and that I never shied away from an opportunity to do so. And I guarantee you, at the end of the path, you're going to want to look back too and know that you, not only that you did some things that were impactful, but you did it the right way, and that you work with people, on the way to doing it. Selfless leadership. Selfless leadership. Thank you. I got 10 or 11 minutes. Anyone but Randy can ask a question now. Anyone but Randy. Thank you. Any questions, comments, reactions? Randy? Okay.
So your book was really a lot of fun to read, and so thank you very much for that gift to all of us. And there were a lot of, your book, thank you for that gift to all of us.
Yeah, thank you.
Your book was really a lot of fun to read because it read fast. It kept us, it kept us going. But out of all the stories and all the messages, I kept asking myself, which one, if Len had to pick one message to share to inspire and empower us, which one would it be?
That's a good question. Probably the low moment, because it was so impactful in my life, personally and professionally. And then that led me on a path to try again, both professionally and personally, because in that low moment, I did some stupid stuff. I made stupid decisions. It did influence me professionally as well. I was at a low emotional moment, and a low emotional, kind of despair personally. That bled over into my professional life. I took a break and kind of got out of the high-level jobs for a little bit. And then it was good, though, because it kind of grounded me again and got me restarted. And then I eventually got recruited to go back to my alma mater, the University of Arizona. And in a few days, as the job as dean, I met Christy 13 years ago yesterday at an alumni event at the Biltmore. And last night we went out and celebrated our first day we met anniversary, 13 years. And so that moment led to a lot of great things for me, both personally and professionally after that. I don't know, that moment more than anything caused me to kind of rethink and recalibrate. And it led to the opportunities to be president a couple times. That probably wouldn't have happened if I hadn't hit that point. Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Hi. Hi. Well, thank you. I've actually read your book as well.
Thank you.
In preparation
One
for
segment
tonight.
or two? How quickly?
Took me about an hour. So my name's Joe. I work in the business school, in Lee Business School, and I've been at UNLV for about 7 years, 20 years in higher education. I'm also I'm in the current cohort, class of 2025, for Leadership Las Vegas through the Vegas
great.
Chamber. And one of the things that we did before the program began for Leadership Las Vegas is we did a personality assessment.
Yeah.
Right. And I already knew this about myself, but I am a servant leader. And Victoria, one of my colleagues, is here, and she, I think, can attest to this. But I put others first, and I want to ignite change. But I am in middle management, so to speak, here at UNLV in the business school. And so I'm wondering, as someone who is a servant leader who selfs less quite often, if not always, how can do you have any advice or any thoughts on how I can ignite or impact change from where I am in the fact that I am a servant leader?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about, thanks for sharing that. And Christy is the leadership facilitator for Henderson Leadership, kind of a similar organization across town. I think about, as I've spent a couple of decades as a faculty member, and then I kind of did what you're doing. And then I was a department chair. That sort of is the entry-level supervisory job on the academic side of the house. It's the hardest job on campus, I think. It's so difficult to be a department chair in higher ed. You're kind of the frontline supervisor. All the complaints come to you, both from faculty, your staff, and students. Everything hits the department chair. And then dean. So one or two or both of those is sort of that mid-level management. Maybe the department chair is more of that example. But I thought that even then, leading selflessly employing servant leadership was a good way to engage faculty and staff in what we were doing. In fact, for me, and I talk about this in the book, going from faculty member to department chair is, talk about having to put your ego aside. Because as faculty, the way faculty are rewarded, it's all about points on the board, but it's you. It's how many points did you score? How many assists did you have? How many rebounds? That's how a faculty member is judged or evaluated. It's on the grant money you brought in and the refereed publications and what your teaching evaluations. And then you shift into department chair with no training. There's no supervisory or leadership training or anything. And all of a sudden now you're responsible for making faculty successful, and not you anymore. It's an abrupt shift, and it was for me as well. But I found that we weren't going to get anything done unless I started helping, to engage faculty that I was working with and staff in trying to move the program forward and move it up to another level. I couldn't do it by myself. And that was the case, right? And maybe because of faculty, and sometimes there's ego involved, servant leadership, that style worked really well and sort of fed into their needs and their personalities really well. And that was a good way to then have the whole team really thrive and drive some top-ranked programs. The MIS program at Washington State, we drove up into rankings, and it wasn't me, it was just because I made sure we had really smart people. I made sure that we all had a general game plan that we'd agreed to of what we were trying to do. I got them the resources they needed, and I got out of the way. And then the team excelled. So I think you can, and in fact, at the mid-level management, in those roles, you have to, that's how the organization moves. That's how it really moves from one level to another level. So mid-level managers, maybe perhaps more than anybody, have to engage that kind of an approach. So you're in the right place at the right time. It's perfect. Yeah, it's perfect. Yep. Yeah.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Professor Jessup.
Yeah.
I'm not associated with the UNLV, but I do come here for lectures like this. Only connection I have is my dad was a Fulbright scholar 35 years back at College of Business, long back. But I just have one suggestion. If you can send a copy of your book to all the Board of Regent members.
If I can send you a copy of the book and say the last book.
To the regents.
Oh, yikes. Yeah, that's where my wife just gave me the sign. Oh, boy. Thank you for that. How are we doing? One more, yeah. Jean, yes.
Well, I've had the privilege of working with Len at both the University of Arizona and here, and I've learned a lot about leadership from you.
Well,
I think I've always,
ditto.
yeah, thank you. I think I've always had the servant leadership mentality, but having somebody as a mentor and a role model really helped me grow in that role. So I want to acknowledge that, and I really enjoyed reading the book. It's really authentic, and that reflects who you are. I guess
Thank you.
we know so much about the importance of having servant leadership, yet many organizations still are, and some more than others, dominated by an ego-driven leader. And just some of your thoughts on what will it take for organizations to change? Because I like you, I agree that that's how you actually engender more success.
Yeah. Let me just say first that Jean was the CFO of the business school, very successfully doing her job back at University of Arizona. And then when I came here, we got into a situation where we needed a CFO. We did a national search, had a search, whole process, and we were able to convince Jean to come up. And I wanted Jean to get the job, not so much because you were an incredible CFO, that by the X's and the O's, that you did the job well, but it was who Jean is as a person, and your personality and the way you lead. And it was perfect for what we were trying to do here at UNLV. And you did a lot at the time that I was here and then after. So thanks for coming up and joining us here.
Fishing for compliments, but
No, it was great. Jean is great. You're great.
And I can,
Yes.
I can say that.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful.
But, right now, I'm not going to get political, but right now we're involved in a national discussion about leadership for the country, and we have a candidate that's got an ego. But my experience has been that if I look all across academia, and corporate and the military, I mean, all these different sort of industry verticals, I'm seeing a shift toward more of a servant leadership style. So not just in academia, I'm seeing it all over. It's not only getting more and more popular in the literature, people writing about it, and it's taking all different forms and different constructs that they're studying, but also just in the practice that I'm seeing with leaders who I work with. And I think you'd probably say the same thing. They all are either shifting to it or they want to, and they want to figure out how to get there. I don't know what's driving that, but the good news is I do think we're shifting toward it and not away from it at a level across the country, which is good. Yeah.
Len, I just wanted to say, sorry, is that okay that this was just inspiring.
Thanks.
Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for being president here. Thank you for all that you've done. And I'm really excited about your future because I know you're going to keep helping people, and I have some ideas.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I'm done with university administration. I think they've gotten that out of my system now. Yeah. No. But but I'm not done. Still trying to be busy, and I definitely want to continue helping out as I can. So that's the plan anyway. Well, Dave, are we at the end of our time?
I got one more for you.
Oh, okay.
So your time as university administrator, different roles, you've had to build a lot of different teams. So when you're building a team, what are the qualities you look for to let you know this is someone I can bring in versus someone no way in hell?
Yeah, that's a good question, boy. I didn't set out to do this, but in the time, 3.5 years or so that I was here, we ended up with 16 new either sort of dean or vice president in that time span. And again, it's not like I came in and thought, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to rebuild this team. I didn't have that as a mandate from the board. It just kind of happened, through a variety of circumstances. So here, as an example, to your point, that was an opportunity to really think about what do we need this team to look like? We knew that there was incredible opportunity ahead for UNLV. We knew that we could be a Carnegie R1, and then that drove the strategic plan for the university. But we were thinking well beyond that. Academically, we benchmarked, we picked 3 really good urban, kind of diverse, dynamic urban institutions that we benchmarked. Arizona State University, University of Houston. Oddly enough, Diane Chase is the provost now, one of the benchmarks. And then University of Central Florida, where she was also the associate vice provost, by the way. And so we picked 3 schools that were just kicking it. And then we sent teams to go visit and find, because they're open, we weren't competing with them directly. We really wanted to be better, bigger and better academically. And we knew that athletically, we knew when the television contracts were going to come up, and they did, and that's when all the topsy-turvy stuff happened and the Pac-12 dissolved. We knew that was all coming, and we wanted to position ourselves for that, then hoping to get pulled up into a Power 5 conference. So that's why, on some level, the stadium was just as important to what we were trying to do as the medical school was. We needed to do both. So to your question, I needed team members who I knew could help us do that were not only good at the X's and O's, that I know they can do their job. And I know that, and I wanted to know, like with Gene, that it was a personality that was going to fit well with what we were trying to do and would be a good person, an easy person to work with. But I wanted people who knew what it was like to sort of run at that level. So that made it easier for us to get to that level with people that had experienced it before. And I think it worked. There was a lot done in a short amount of time. The team, I think, proved to be effective. I will say one other thing really quickly. Somebody independently did a study of leadership teams in higher ed all across the country, and then it was reported in Inside Higher Ed shortly after I left and went down to Claremont. They were ranking those teams on a kind of a number of sort of strength of the team and a number of diversity measures as well for the team. That team, like a year later when that study was done after I left, the UNLV leadership team was ranked number 1 in the country. Yeah. It was a good team. It worked. Yeah. I'm proud of it.
Can I ask one last one if you don't
Please,
mind?
yeah.
What inspired you to write the book? Tell us about the sequel, your next book. How long do we have to wait?
Oh my God. the book was, gosh, I got my PhD and I was 35 years then after that in higher ed. And probably the last 20 of it in the leadership roles, kind of from dean and above. So that book began 30 years ago. I started jotting down little stories and tucking things away like that. That's an interesting story that might be useful at some point, collecting and gathering. So it was, in the works for a long time. I finally, I was encouraged by Christy, and Bill Maynard is a mentor of mine. I still have many, many mentors that I draw on to this day, and I will continue to do that. And Bill Maynard is one. And he and Christy and others were encouraging me, it's time. You need to collect these things up. It's time to write something on leadership. And so that kind of prompted me to okay, that was that summer. We were still heavy hybrid down at Claremont. I had time, like I said, nights and weekends, kind of the back half of the summer, and just finally said, all right, I'm going to finally do this and sit down and knock it out. So I've written a kind of a rough draft of book number 2. And I'm just waiting I'm still relatively busy. I'm waiting for more time to be able to spend time on it. That one's more focused on entrepreneurial leadership, kind of leadership through the lens of entrepreneurship and innovation. And that appropriately, we got self-less, that one create more. It's just a little bit different take on leadership. So, I don't know, someday, I'm not sure when I'll be able to finish that.
That's on my part.
Yeah. Thanks for the ad for book 2.
All right, I think that will wrap it there. Thanks so much, Len.
Yeah.
Another round of applause for Len Jessup.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Thank you.
And just a reminder, the 19th, we'll be doing a community forum here, rolling out some new research we commissioned on the future of care economy in Southern Nevada, looking at elder care and child care. Emails forthcoming.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.